time. I got caught up in the chat there. Turning that off. Switch. Oh, there I am. Okay. Great. Switching things around. Well, good morning. I think I'm streaming. Looks like my audio is good. Looks like my bit rate is good. So hello, good morning. Welcome to the second day of English 386, the graphic novel class at UMW. As you can see here on my browser tabs, I've got a bunch of things I want to talk about. Some of these things are unrelated. I was just looking for a few things. But today, the two big things I want to talk about are, or make sure we cover, are some of the logistics stuff and assignment things, stuff I didn't quite get to on Monday, and also introduce what's coming up Friday and talk a bit about the schedule, because I've got the schedule at least tentatively set for the first few weeks of class, and so I want to talk about some of those things and some of the logistics of how things are going to go. But yeah, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're doing well. I appreciate everyone who responded to the survey. I think everyone did, so I actually know everyone did, so thank you for doing that. That's really helpful because it let me start thinking about the breakdown between the two. So yeah, interesting discussion. I raised a question in Discord about the trailer for the Batman movie, and it is not entirely off topic. So definitely curious about the movie, interested to see what you think. It's also a way to kind of help me get to know what your perspective is. I mean, Batman is a character that some people feel really strongly about, either in favor or against, actually. So I'm curious to see kind of what your take on it is, especially Robert Pattinson's version of it. I mean, that's the big question, right? Because we've got, I mean, Batman is such an iconic character, and certain portrayals of Batman are really iconic, and so any actor who attempts to take that on has a lot to, I guess, live up to or respond to in terms of their performance. And so I don't know. I mean, Robert Pattinson is not an actor I know very well. Certainly he's done some good work, I guess, but I don't really have any feelings about him as an actor, so I don't know. But it's an interesting role to step in. I mean, I really liked certain Batmans. I mean, just to give my very unofficial, non-expert opinion, but I have liked. I mean, of course, Adam West's Batman is iconic. I love the campy Batman, but and I think George Clooney's Batman is also kind of, I think, underrated. I think in the sense that I think he tried to play it as the cheesy Adam West Batman. Like, he tried to be like the serious, like, updated take on the Batman through the lens of the campy version, and it didn't quite work. But I think Christian Bale's Batman is also interestingly overrated in the sense that I think Christian Bale worked pretty hard to play that as an understated performance. In other words, like, he was really the foil to much more interesting villain characters. So Heath Ledger's Joker is really the main character of that movie, and Batman is just kind of there to facilitate and give the Joker an opportunity to be on screen. And so I really like that about Christian Bale's performance, but it's not really I mean, it is a performance, but it's not the main thing that is valuable about that movie, I guess. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, I guess. Batman is one of these eternally recurring characters, right? I mean, we can't go beyond Batman, but it's going to be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's a different part of the Batman mythology, a different. I gather that this is sort of a younger Batman than we usually see, so it'll be interesting. I don't know. I mean, Batman is. I think what people like about Batman, what I certainly like about Batman, is the I guess the noir aspects of the aesthetics, like the darkness of it, but also the like the almost postmodern take on Batman. Like, Batman is almost always postmodern. Like, when you think about postmodernism in comics, you can think about the campiness as one version of postmodernism, but then you can think of kind of the dark revision of Batman in the Dark Knight books as another version of postmodernism, or another kind of postmodernism expressed through a comic character. And Batman is always that character that that goes there, I guess, and very recognizable, and very much someone who even people who don't read a lot of comics or watch comic book movies know about and have ideas about Batman. So I think he's a really interesting character. I mean, this doesn't totally matter, but the Ben Affleck. Yeah, Ben Affleck. I didn't even mention Ben Affleck because it doesn't. I mean, it made no impression on me at all. But the what was I going to say? Oh yeah, like in this class, I am teaching Watchmen, obviously, and you've seen that on the schedule. There is a time period in comic history, like if we, we're not going into the whole ages or the whole breakdown of comic history, but people do like to think about comic book history in terms of different ages, like a Silver Age, a Golden Age, and there's a period in the 1980s that sometimes people call the Dark Age or the Postmodern Age, and the really iconic book from that period is Watchmen, but also The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller is another one that people gravitate towards as kind of the emblematic of that period of comic book history and comic book art. I have taught The Dark Knight Returns once or twice, and it's okay. It does not have as much. It's just not as complex a literary text as Watchmen is, I find, even though I think they deal with some similar themes and are similarly problematic. I ultimately go back to Watchmen just because there's more of it, I guess. There's more depth to it, like you can keep digging into it and finding new things, whereas I feel like with Frank Miller's work, you kind of read it and you kind of get it, and that's good enough. And it doesn't necessarily reward much more beyond that. Randomly, I've met Frank Miller's brother because my old neighbor is like related to him, and so he comes by the house sometimes, and I've said hi and chatted a bit, kind of randomly. But anyway, so this is I'm looking at the schedule right now just to kind of give you a sense of where we are. I'm still tweaking a bit, but I wanted to give you a sense of the logic to it right now and kind of show you what, basically show you what this means. So we are here today, 8/26/20, and I'll probably do something to annotate days that will be live like this and days where we'll be doing other things. But so it looks like a really good discussion going on in Discord. I'm not able to follow it totally, so I'll look into that later. But I wanted to give you a sense of this. So what I have here is like Roloff Topfer's The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck. So I'm going to introduce that today, but it's on the schedule for Friday, meaning that's the day when we will talk about it or do something about it. So that's the day by which you should have read it. It's not very long. You'll be fine reading it between now. But let's see. Oh, did someone lose me? I just saw Poofaloof was saying they may have lost me. What do you mean lose me? If you do have issues with the stream, I mean, if you lost me, you can't hear me saying this, but if you do have issues with the stream, you can let me know, certainly, or either the general channel or live stream chat, I guess, is really what that's for. And then I guess the Twitch chat is also good. So let me make sure you can hear me or get back to me. If everyone lost me, then that's a big issue. Let me just respond real quick here. So I know sometimes the stream will freeze. I don't know if that's what happened. So I posed that question there, but hopefully I'm still there. If you do lose me, let me know as soon as you do so that I can try to address it, or hopefully it'll, yeah. I mean, it kept streaming, and these are all recorded anyway, so hopefully the recording, comes through. But yeah, if anyone else hasn't had that issue, so Poofaloof, it could have just been like your internet connection might have hiccuped, or the stream itself could have hiccuped, and I don't know which. So. Okay, so thanks. All right, so what I was saying was that the schedule is set up so that when you read a particular day, that's the day you should have read that. And often I will just use Canvas announcement or daily introductions to tell you which part of these things to read. Some of these, like, it's a little harder to say read up to this page, for example, because some things don't have pages, like, or they don't have page numbers. Like the city does not have page numbers, so I kind of have to just say read up to the page that looks like this, and then show you the page to read to, or other things. So that's why those aren't listed day by day with numbers for pages, but. Often it's just kind of read the whole thing. For the McKay and Harriman stuff, I will give you kind of a date range to link to, and I have to give you a link to. I'll give you a link to the website where many of those are hosted, and then there's a couple more in Canvas. So there's kind of different things to navigate with that. So I'll need to write that up into an announcement. But this will give you, by looking at the schedule, you get a sense of what you need to have access to by when. So you can see Watchmen. I've rearranged this from how I normally do it. So we're going to be getting into Watchmen in week 4, and so that'll be, ideally, hopefully, that'll be our face-to-face week when we're finally together. So I'll be introducing it on that Friday, possibly, and then getting into it. We'll get started with it on Monday. And you can also see where I've started linking in the assignments. But there's a lot of these things that I'm still sort of playing with the sequencing on. So I want to think about that a little bit more, and then see what to do with that. I probably want to spend a little bit more time with some of these books. I've got them kind of penciled in as a week each, but I feel like we'll need more than a week on some of these things. So that's the kind of thing I'm still playing with as we get later on. Part of it too depends on kind of how the day-to-day goes in this class. It's obviously very different in terms of like a discussion, and this is usually a very discussion-oriented class. So I have to kind of see how this online modality works for that, and then kind of think about how to do it. With the different differentiated deliveries and so on. So let me see. I don't want to pull up Canvas because that will have names on it, but I have put you in groups tentatively based on your responses to the survey. I was interested to see that about half of you said you had no preference and you could do Monday. So you could do either Wednesday or Friday equally. Another half of you said, roughly half of you said you could do either, but you would prefer Wednesday. And then if you had strong preferences for Wednesday and a few had strong preferences for Friday, and only a couple of you said that you plan to stay online the whole semester. So given that, I put you into the groups based on that kind of first choice. If you didn't care either way, then you probably ended up on Fridays. But if you expressed a preference for Wednesday, you probably ended up on Wednesday. I think that looks pretty good. So this is... So take a look. I think you can see it in Canvas if you go to the way I look at it, it goes to, there's a link that says people, and then I see groups, and then I can see which groups are there. So yeah, so someone just asked that question. Let me see if I can switch. Let me see if I might be able to get my, well, I don't know. Let me see, I'll see if I can get Canvas into student preview mode, and then I can show you what it looks like, or what it should look like to you. Oops, not that. Let's see, am I showing you my browser? Yeah, okay. So if I go to student view, why is it, come on. I'm trying to click on student view, but it jumps out of the way right before I click. There we go. So what was the question? Yeah, so it's people, and then groups. That's what it looks like to me, and then you should be able to see. I mean, you'll see all the groups, but hopefully you'll see the one you're in, which is these three. And these are really, I think I'm going to call these cohorts, because these are kind of larger groups, and you'll have a slightly smaller group that you will work on with your webcomic. But I want each of those groups to stay in the same cohort. So like, probably what I'm thinking is 2 Friday groups and two webcomic groups for Friday, 2 webcomic groups for Wednesday, and then another for the online. So there would be 5 total groups probably. So if you look at how these are grouped, you can see these people in here. You may all know each other, and so you may already have an idea of who you would like to work with, or who you would like to who you would prefer not to work with, if you know that. So let me know with a private message or email if you have a strong preference for working with someone, or for not working with a specific person. Otherwise, I'll just assign these groups, because I don't want to Yeah, I want to get these locked in so there's not a lot of movement. And someone just asked if you can make Discord channels for the groups, and yes, I can. I don't know, maybe you can too. Let's try it. I'll do it right now. So I'll make a Friday cohort group and a Wednesday cohort. And if you've used Slack before, the way that Slack works, when you create a channel, you have to join the channel to see it. But I believe on Discord, everybody can see every channel. So I just made these text channels, and so you might see them. They might pop up, and I'll just I'll make it I'll just call it online cohort. So these are your daily cohorts, and it might be useful occasionally to coordinate or to communicate with each of those groups specifically. So you now have those channels. So see if that works. Just made them. Okay. So I'm just checking. Yeah, let me know if I think that works. But take a look, and if not, let me know, please. Okay, so yeah, again, and also, like, I put you in these Wednesday and Friday groups. If you actually change your mind, if you realize that actually I would rather be in the other, let me know so I can go ahead and switch you. But once we get these settled, I don't want there to be much movement. That said, since each group has 9 students currently in it at most, it might be possible for you to switch a day occasionally, but let me know ahead of time. Don't come unless you know I've given you permission to come on a off day, if that makes sense. Okay, and also I was pleased to see that many of you seem really excited about the idea of face-to-face. I mean, some of you had some concerns, and those are, of course, important and valid, and we'll do everything we can to be safe and follow, the guidance of our administrators and people who are making the decision about going face-to-face. But I'm glad to see that many of you are excited about going face-to-face. I certainly am. I'm confident we can do it safely. I think there are bigger questions about just the university community and how to do that safely. But I think UMW has the right strategy. There's certainly some concerning news from other universities, and so we'll see how UMW fares in that. I guess, or maybe administrators will decide maybe not to go face to face at all. Maybe they'll try to play it more conservatively. We shall see. Okay, so let's talk a bit about. Let me say a little bit more about the schedule, and then I'll get into Mr. Oldbuck. So this is kind of how we're proceeding. It is not strictly speaking historical. Like, I'm not trying to do an exhaustive history of comics at all. But these early things that I'm assigning are relatively historically important, if that makes sense. So these are things that are older and important in terms of being influential, but they are also important formally, meaning they give us a good sense of what comics are and how they work even today. They're good introductions to the medium of comics, and so that's what why I gravitate towards these. So, and not just comics, but really the graphic novel as a genre of comics. Like, that's another way of thinking about this separately. I do like to have kind of a Socratic discussion sometimes in this day of class where we talk about it and try to define a comic and come up with a definition that works. And it's interesting and it's kind of challenging. So we'll see. We will do that later. But I think these are different. What you'll see in these first few readings are different ways of doing things that are all recognizably comics, but each of them might require a different tweak to our definition, and that's why they're really interesting as they go here. Yeah, and so we will then be getting into some theory, and there are essentially 3 different theorists whose ideas I would like us to kind of learn from. There's a lot more, obviously, but these are 3 different writers who talk about the form of comics and what makes it unique, and that's going to be useful for us. So we'll start off with Scott McCloud. I think Scott McCloud is great in terms of being really accessible and gives us some things to think about and respond to. That said, I think a lot of his ideas don't go far enough, or like they introduce an idea or a question but don't fully explore it. So I want to look at some other ways of thinking about comic structure, especially that I think go a bit further and do a better job. That said, they're much more complicated. At least the theory of Gronstein's work is very abstract and dense and hard to work with. So, we'll do our best with that. But partly, I want you to know that it exists, and then I'll do my best to kind of explain it because it is something that takes a bit to get into. And then we'll look at Donald Alt, who was my advisor in grad school and who I learned a lot from while I was there. So we will look at his analysis of some Donald Duck comics, which I think is great. So that's kind of where we're going to go in terms of theory. Beyond that, I try to pair at least one theoretically oriented reading with each of our books. So at least one critical take on it or some kind of scholarly writing that helps us understand it differently. And you'll see that, like I have one already here for to kind of go with chapter 5 of Watchmen. And I'll be kind of planning that out, at least one per book. So we'll be reading a book and then reading at least one article or essay or chapter or maybe a video about that from a scholarly point of view to see what we can learn from a scholarly point of view and see how that point of view might help us revise our understandings of comics as we read them. Okay, so that's kind of the overall idea of especially these early things. So let's take a look. Now there's the first thing that I'd like for you to read and be prepared to discuss is The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck by Rodolphe Töpfer. Now there are several versions of this online, and I found one I liked this morning that I had not seen before, so I can upload that to Canvas, but also I encourage you just to search for it yourself because you'll find different versions of it, and sometimes comparing different versions of it or different web versions of it are kind of interesting. So it's an open source text. You can find multiple copies of it, different scans of it online. So it's not unreasonable just to like I've done here just search for it, right? So I just went to this is DuckDuckGo as a search engine, and you can see different versions of it. I usually go to the Dartmouth version of it here because it's very high quality, very high resolution scans. But because they're very high resolution scans, they take a long time to download on a slower connection or just on Wi-Fi even. So they're also like standalone JPEGs. So each of them is an image by itself. So you kind of have to click through to see them, and that's not always convenient. I did find, it's a little awkward, but I did find, let's see if I can find it. Oh, here's this one might be good too. This is archive.org. So archive.org looks like that looks like the same copy that they've got a scan of here, but also very high resolution, so you can see how long it's taking just to load this page. So your mileage may vary in terms of this. But that's really pretty clear though. I like that. Oh yeah, this is good. Okay, nice. So what we have here is probably the first comic book published in America. The idea of being first is not super important to me. I'm more interested in kind of what it is and how it looks and how we read it than whether or not it was truly the first, but it probably was, and that's fine. So Töpfer was a Swiss writer and artist and illustrator, and he produced this in Europe first, and then it was eventually translated and published in America just a few years later. So 1837 is the date it was published in Switzerland, and then it was later published in Germany, and then in different English language contexts. And so I believe the date for the first American publication is 1842. But I mean, think about how long ago that was, right? I mean, that's something that history sometimes it's hard to think of scale or parallelism, but we're talking pre-Civil War, right? I mean, we're talking, Jackson administration. We're talking a different kind of America, basically. Certainly, different kinds of things going on in Europe. So thinking about the audience for this is probably important. But I think just reading it on its own terms is also, I think, really valuable. And that's all I'm asking you to do is read it. And then on Friday, we'll try to discuss it. And that discussion will, figuring out the logistics of that will be a little weird, but we'll discuss it basically. And I mean, you can read it fairly quickly. So if you read it and you're not sure what you think of it, go back and read it again. As you can see, there's illustration and then there's a caption below it. So we have an illustration and we also have a bar here separating the different illustrations, and then the captions below go with the image above it. So as you read, kind of click through it. I think this is probably the best version of it, actually. So I'm just gonna share this particular link to it in. I'll put it in live stream chat now. So, but I'll share it in an announcement later. So there, I'll just reply to the question here in Discord. This seems to be. Okay, so yeah, just link to that in the archive.org version. So check that out. And you know, it's got I don't know what else to say about it to help you appreciate it, but the main character is Mr. Oldbuck here, and he has a number of problems that he attempts to solve, and his continual quest is to his lady love, who you can see here in the distance on this panel. She's heading off there. She's an interesting presence in this book. So I don't know. There's a lot to say about their relationship as you read through it. But let's take a look. Maybe I can just do this here, since let's see, we still have we still have lots of viewers. So let's try this. You know, normally in a class discussion, what I would do is pose a question and then let different people answer it, and then kind of follow up on whatever ideas or themes emerge through those answers, and then kind of play them off of each other to try to get us towards a mutual understanding of what we're seeing and what we're talking about. And that's going to be a little harder to do online, but let's try it, at least a question here. So if we look at this, I mean, I've given you this as the, let's stay on this page here, page 2, I think. So, but given the definition that this is the first American comic book, possibly, I think one question is, given this artifact and given what you see here, how do you know it's a comic book? So what do you think? I mean, you can, and let's put this in. I'll type this in the live stream chat channel. So, so when you see Obadiah, Oldbuck, how do you know it's a comic book? And you could also disagree, by the way. Like I mean, I've said this is a comic book. You might see it differently, or you might have a hard time seeing it as a comic book, and that's fine too. Like that's a good discussion question too. So, lots of people typing. Let's see what you think. Yeah, panels. Good. So we have panels. This is gonna be hard for me to type and talk, but I'll do my best. Right. We have panels, indeed. Panels. Yeah, you'll see Arrow 279 just posted that point out these scenes are broken up, and they are. Like they're broken up into panels. As you read it, though, you'll see that each of the sequences in it are also definitely scenes. Like he'll go through various problems, attempt to solve them, and usually fail, and then he'll kind of start over again and try again. And that pattern of starting over again is very much like a scene, and that's something that you see as a comic structure. Yeah, okay. So we've got panels with text, sequential, and yeah, okay, great. So this is a good point there too. Yeah, CED just wrote, I like that point said about the sequence and the payoff. It's about a larger structure than individual images, right? Right, because comic art predates this. The idea of drawing something in a silly way to exaggerate characteristics of someone, like caricature art. Caricature art is much older, actually. So it's something that people already had. The real innovation, possibly, if we follow this definition logically, is sequence. Like the idea that you can go left to right. Is this left and right? I forget if my video is flipped or not. But if you go left to right, or right to left, whatever, but any kind of juxtaposition, it's the idea that we have juxtaposition creating meaning. The fact that these two things are near each other physically on the page means that they are syntactically near each other in terms of how we read it, and so we understand that as having a meaning based on that proximity, and that meaning is what drives our understanding of it. And then it also built up in this case to tell us a story. So now we have narrative, right? And now we can talk about that. Okay, great. So there's also pretty interesting things here. Now the last few comments even, the relationship between images and text is very important. Do you think you could have one without the other? So I just posted this here and I'll say it again, but looking at these two, looking at this is the only example so far, right? We have images, we have text. Physically, they are very separate, right? We have at the top an image, we have some text at the bottom. So you could, physically just cut out the bottom very easily, right? I mean, there's certainly ways you could do it in Photoshop or just with scissors if you had a physical copy. And so we could separate them physically. But conceptually, can we separate them? In other words, could we make sense of the image without the text? Could we make sense of the text without the image? Right? In other words, could either of them exist independently? If so, would they be as valuable? Right? And that's a great point that Shannon just pointed out, that sometimes comics don't have to have words. We'll look at some that don't have words, and sometimes that can be very impactful. Like if we think about what text does for an image, sometimes taking that away, denying us that, can be very powerful, and really can suck you into a story in a really compelling way. So when we think about what images do, images can mean lots of things. Like an image on its own could be lots of different things, and one of the functions that text can play is to fix meaning in place, like to say that this image means that. So a caption is a way of saying this is what this image is, whereas an image by itself could proliferate in terms of what it means to many different people. So when you take away that fixative aspect of text, images can proliferate again, or they can put us back into we almost kind of get lazy in terms of image interpretation, because we get used to the text telling us what to think about it or telling us what an image is, and when that gets taken away, or when it doesn't exist in the first place, we have to do more work as the reader to make sense of the images and understand them as being a story or having an idea. And that work can be frustrating, but also it can be really compelling. If you do that work, you get into it, and then suddenly you're so much closer to it than you realize, because you don't have that filter of text to decide if you're going to be involved or not, if that makes sense. So you read an image, and then suddenly it becomes clear, and your proximity to whatever's going on might be much more intense than you realized. And I know that that's hard to explain without a good example. And this is not really a good example of that. There is an example I'm thinking of that is always a shocking moment in a comic. I'm not going to read it or show it to you all, but there is so we'll be reading Watchmen. There's a book called, another book by Alan Moore called From Hell, and the artist Eddie Campbell has a really sparse and really kind of messy looking line. And it's really intriguing in terms of the artwork, because it's really creepy and gross. Even though it seems really spare, it actually can be very. There are certain moments in that book where it's about the Grim Reaper. I mean, it's not Grim Reaper, Jack the Ripper. It's about Jack the Ripper, about a serial killer, and some of the scenes are incredibly graphic. But what I find really interesting about it artistically is that you don't notice that until you spend a little, you look at Eddie Campbell's images and you kind of have to squint at them a little bit, and you kind of puzzle at them, and then you're like, oh, that's what that is. And that moment of oh my gosh, that's what I'm looking at, is really, it's really compelling, it's really gross, it's really alienating actually, but it's an impressive accomplishment in terms of art, right? And if I know that I'm reading a book about a serial killer, I know I'm just gonna kind of, squint, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna kind of hold myself back in terms of what I look at, just because it's gross, it's upsetting. But in From Hell, you kind of are off balanced with that. You kind of have to be I don't know, you get into a different point with that. Yeah. It is pretty interesting, as Sed's pointing out. So I don't know if Sed, if you pronounce that's how you want to pronounce your nickname there, but the you raise a really interesting experiment, or you imply the possibility of a really interesting experiment, taking away one or the other and seeing what you're left with. That's actually the point of the disassembly assignments, is to kind of take things away and see what happens. And sometimes things happen, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes you don't know which it's going to be until you try it. And that's the point of disassembling and seeing what you can come up with. Right. So I was planning to introduce that assignment a little bit more next week, but I guess I can say things now if you have questions. But yeah, taking things like taking it out and seeing what happens. Cedric. Okay. Thank you. Sed. Right. Because there's, I mean, as you know, at UMW we have a well-known Cedric who he pronounces as Cedric, so we have to. It's worthwhile to check. It makes sense to check. So thank you. Right. So the yes, yeah, good point, Piper. That's another great example. Yes, indeed. Okay, and then Unofficial Marks has raised another. I think this is. I often do show this one as an example of kind of what happens in terms of disassembling, and so this we might as well just take a look, right? So this is Garfield minus Garfield is a site. Well, you can say it's a site dedicated to removing Garfield from Garfield comic strips. I don't think it's been updated for a while, but you can certainly see the point very quickly, right? I don't know if they published every one of them, but you can see how this is. Well, hopefully you can see it's kind of small, but this is a Garfield comic. Presumably Garfield was originally in this, and actually, so I think whoever just mentioned this in Discord, and there are different versions of this. Like, right, one version is you take Garfield's thought bubbles away and you still have Garfield there. I like this version because you actually take Garfield away entirely, and now you're just left with John, and it's very it's very relatable in a different way than the ways that the normal Garfield comics are. It's you feel. I mean, it's amazing how well it works, and it's very. I mean, it's sad, but it's also very charming in a way too. I feel like you feel bad for John, but you feel like you know him, or you feel like you are him, and I think that's really good. Right. I mean, so it sort of raises this idea, or kind of creates this world, which is actually the real world, where a real world anyway, where John is having these conversations with himself and thinking about these things on his own. And I mean, and sometimes they're just a little too real. Like this is pretty rough, actually. A comic for our times, and yet then you get these pretty bizarre ones. And you're right, yeah, they do. I mean, Garfield comic strips without Garfield in them, we do get a picture of John as essentially neurotic, like as having actual, possibly mental health problems and breakdowns. I mean, that's the only logical interpretation of some of these things, but with it's just so depressing. Yeah, well, anyway, so another version of this, or another thing like it, what is it? It's hard to find sometimes because the name of it is, I don't remember. Peanuts. The version was called Three Nuts, I think. I mean, but it's hard to find. It's hard to find because the name is like a common word. Maybe if someone can find this, let me know. But the disassembly, here it is. It's the number 3 and then enuts.com. The point of this is that someone noticed that every peanut strip is organized so that the punchline is in the 4th panel. And so if you take that 4th panel away, it's just regular life without the jokes. And it's often, very just kind of realistic, almost boring, sometimes depressing situations that people are having or observations that they're making, and that's it. And it becomes, this kind of existentialist thing, which was always there to begin with. Like, that's the thing that I think is great about both of these, is that they're not adding new content. They're discovering things that were already there and just taking away the other parts. And so we see that there's, this is all there is to it. I don't know how this person, how these are made. This one actually looks like it stays up to date, or at least it publishes frequently. It is certainly possible to automate these kinds of things and like write a script that will programmatically take out the last panel or take out a certain character. That might be harder, but it's also relatively easy to do just manually, and might not take that much time. So maybe that's why whoever makes this is pretty consistent about posting these. But this is the kind of thing that I'm interested in with the disassembly assignment, definitely. And what we see here, and I mean, this is more about at the narrative level, but in the Garfield example, we see how image and text can work separately, but if we take them apart completely, we end up with a very different narrative and a very different story. It might be valuable, it might be good, but it's very different. And what I'm interested in helping you notice is when we look at things like Obadiah Oldbuck, things that we intuitively recognize as comics, my argument is that part of that intuitive recognition has to do with the way that images and text are working together, not as like equal partners, but really as a new hybrid thing together. So we actually use the word image text a lot to talk about this kind of thing. So these are image textual works because we read the images, we see the text, but really it's all together. Like, these are things that are happening, it's doing its thing together in a way that's intimately connected. A little bit less intimately connected perhaps in Obadiah Oldbuck, at least actually on the geography of the page, they are somewhat more separated. But with a lot of things we'll look at later is to see, we'll see things that are much more intimately connected, or things that lacking one or the other become kind of different. So I just saw a question. Let me see. What was that question? Yeah, I think so. Christine's question about peeling back the potential distracting aspect of the comic. I mean, it's distracting only in the sense that there might be something else. Like, we have a comic that is entire on its own. It's total on its own. But then the idea is that by taking some part out of it, whatever's left is also still valuable or recognizable in some way. And it might be very different, but it's understanding what we take away, what happens in terms of our interpretation of it when we take away some visual part of it, right? So it might be removing the text, or removing the speech bubbles, or removing, some the color. There are different ways that we'll understand, that will kind of, as you experiment with it and as we see compare what everyone else does, we'll see how the vocabulary of comics, different parts of that vocabulary can affect our reading differently, and then taking out that vocabulary, taking out a particular element of that vocabulary will change it in sometimes radically different ways and sometimes subtly different ways. It's really just about, honestly, just messing around until you get something interesting, and that's usually what happens. Oh yeah, so the Smith's lyrics and Charlie Brown's speech bubbles. Yeah, that works well. There's also the Family Circus with Nietzsche quotes, which also works really, really well. Those are a little different than what we're trying to do for disassembly, because those are adding things, and I want you to avoid, I don't want you to add things, I want you to just take things away. But those are definitely pretty interesting examples of things people can do with comics, and it's good stuff. So Obadiah Oldbuck, so I've linked there in Discord, and I will also put an announcement. And what I'll do in that announcement is I'll give you some like leading questions as far as like things to think about as you read, and then we'll talk about those questions on Friday. Now, let me say a little bit about the plan for Friday. Now, I think this actually worked pretty well with me talking. I mean, better than I expected, actually, of me saying things and then you all typing things and then me responding on screen. I mean, that's one way to have a conversation. It's not really a conversation. I'm definitely in control here. I'm the one on camera. I'm just here. So what I want to try on Friday is actually a bit more of, I don't know what the right word is, not democratic, but like in the physical space of a classroom, what I usually do for this class is I don't stand up front, even though I do probably do a lot of the talking. I don't, it's not necessarily a lecture, although maybe it is. But what I usually like to do with the graphic novel class especially is sit down in a conversation circle or a conversation shape, because it's usually hard to make a circle. So we just call it the conversation shape. And I'm sitting, at eye level with everyone, and we can have a conversation that, I mean, yeah, I realize there's a power differential still. Like, I'm still the professor and I'm still the one driving the discussion, but it is a bit more, I hope anyway, that being at eye level together, that more people can feel like they can jump in on the conversation. So what I want to try Friday is something that is the closest approximation I can think of to that. I don't want to do a Zoom chat, like group chat, group whatever that's called in Zoom. I mean, maybe we can do that someday, but I want to try something else first, which is simply a Discord conversation, like we just did, like many of you just did in the live stream chat channel. So I would like to try that on Friday, but without me on camera. So I will be in there in the chat with you, leading the discussion and raising questions and letting you answer them, and we'll see how that goes. It'll be different. I won't be visually in charge. I think it'll work though. I hope it will. I don't know. This is all kind of experimenting, but I find that in terms of a chat kind of thing, like Discord, it can work asynchronously, but it works better synchronously. If there's people online at the same time chatting with each other, you're more likely to find that engaging and useful than if you are posting things after the fact. Because when people post things after the fact, they tend to try to pack a lot into each post, and they end up being these big paragraphs of things, and that's hard to interact with because it's just a paragraph. It's just like a bunch of essays. So I want to try just an online conversation on Discord on Friday. So that'll be at the normal time. I mean just text. So Shannon just asked, do we mean using the voice channel? I mean just using the text channel. Although that is another option we could consider, the voice channel in Discord. And maybe, if it ends up not going well Friday, maybe we'll try that. Maybe we'll try switching into the voice channel and seeing how that goes. But we're going to try just a live, real-time text chat on Friday and see how that works. This will be an interesting experiment, but what your homework is to read Obadiah Oldbuck, and mainly, and pay attention to any announcements that I send through Canvas, in case I decide to revise that plan. But that's basically what I plan to do. Speaking of Canvas, let me just do a couple other things and then I'll wrap up, because I realize I'm about at 50 minutes for today. So we've got, you may have noticed, the question was about I just saw a question about the disassembly assignment, and I've got it tentatively on September 21st. I say tentative just because I need to kind of double check a few things, but that's probably, that seems right to me. So it usually, it should take you about 2 weeks to do it. I had planned on not introducing an assignment yet. Really, as you can see, I was planning on introducing the assignment on the 7th, but I kind of did already just now. So that's 9:21. I think that should be plenty of time to do something interesting for that. So I saw a couple more questions. I already lost whatever my train of thought was. Oh yeah, no, let me finish my thought about Canvas, and then I'll answer your questions, because I saw another one come in. So on Canvas, again, announcements are going to be really useful. Make sure you've got your notifications set up here. I don't know if I can do this with the test student. I can't. Okay, let me leave my student view. So if you go to your notifications settings in Canvas, make sure, and I assume all your other classes are using Canvas, they hopefully are, but make sure you've got these set up in a way that actually is going to work for you, that you're actually going to see things. You can actually have it send you text messages if that's something that you're more likely to respond to. But for this class, announcements are the big thing. That's going to be the common denominator. I'll probably send you at least one a day, honestly, like on days when we have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But you can see other things about updates and things. It's important to have this ready to go. That is not my phone number, so I don't know why it's set up that way. What is that? I do use Cricket Wireless, but that is not my phone number, so I don't know why it says that. I will give you my phone number though. It's Maybe that is it. I don't know. I have several different phone numbers, but someone had asked about my office hours, and I make myself available anytime, but as far as schedulable time that you can reserve, like book an appointment, I'm trying to keep that on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons. But I am certainly available much more than that. And I think actually for the appointment thing, I might have already set it up to be like 10 to 5. But officially 12 to 4, Tuesdays and Thursdays are my office hours. I will be online, certainly in Discord. If you just see me online, anytime you see me online, you're welcome to send me a message. I'll have the green, whatever it is, next to my name. And so you're welcome to send me a message, DM me in Discord, or of course email, and I try to get back to those as quickly as I can. If it's a long, complicated question, sometimes email works better, but if it's something quick, or if it's something that I'll need to follow up or kind of walk you through something, Discord would be better because it's more of a chat kind of space. But yeah, these are my generic office hours. And that's my voice number if you want to call me, but leave a message because I don't usually answer my phone unless I know who it is. And then this is my text number. So is that this number? It is. Okay, that's why that number exists. But I don't actually ever. Maybe I will. I'm going to switch this on for now just to see if that works. So the other thing I wanted to mention about Canvas is that, and I've seen many of you have already done this, they've actually added this feature now where you can set your pronouns in Canvas, which is nice. That's a feature that I know I requested like years ago. And so there used to be a way you could do it if you added a special link, it would show up next to your, on your profile anyway. But like that, you don't need that anymore now because you can just select it from a dropdown. So yeah, might as well, right? It's another thing that's helpful. As far as clarifying things. So I think I should probably wrap it up. Are there any more questions before I do? I saw a couple more. So Poofaloof and Christine, hopefully I answered your questions about the due date. And if I change that, of course, I'll let you know, but that's my plan for now. Okay, I'm just seeing there's lots of GIFs going on in the cohort channels. All right, great. Hello, everyone. Okay, well, thanks for joining me today. That was a good, quick discussion about some of the formal structures of comics, and we'll get into that a bit more after you've had a chance to read The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck, and so we have some examples of that. In general, I'll just tell you the things to pay attention to are the kinds of things we already talked about, or I talked about, and that you all typed about, which are the formal aspects of it, the things about how it's built that help us recognize it as a comic. And the other thing is, look at the narrative. Like, I'm trying to understand kind of what his deal is as a character. It is a story. It is, like comic story, but it's I don't know. It's odd. You'll find things unusual about it, I think. So we'll talk about it, and then that'll be our day for Friday. And then I will also on Friday introduce and talk about, or give you some introduction to the next set of things and some links and so on. Okay, well, thanks for joining me this morning. Good to see you all online, and hopefully, good for you to see me, I guess. So, hope you're doing well. If you have any questions, let me know. Of course, I'll be online for a little while, and then I do have an afternoon class, so I will be online for that. But I might not be able to respond quickly if I'm in the middle of another class. So, just keep that in mind. Okay, well, have a good day. See you later.